Duplicate items. What are they and why should you care? Well, if a user connects your app to their bank using Plaid, and then connects your app again to that same bank using the same login credentials, you essentially have two Plaid connections, the things we call items, to your user's financial institution that are the same. So why is this bad? Well, one reason is that it might confuse your app. If you're building like some kind of wealth management software and your user connects their brokerage account multiple times, they're going to have an amazing but kind of inaccurate net worth. But the other reason is that for a lot of Plaid products, you get charged per item. That is, per connection to a user's bank. So if your user links to their bank account multiple times, even though it's the same item and the same account, you will get charged for each of these connections. And at Plaid, we'd rather charge you because our businesses are growing together, not because your users are making mistakes. So let's talk about how to identify and fix these on today's quick tip. So one of the biggest ways you can avoid duplicate items is really more of a design solution than a technical one, and that's to make adjustments to your UI so that your users don't accidentally try to create them in the first place. So first things first, on the same page where you ask your user to connect to their financial institution using Link, show a list of all their banks they're already connected to. And then, why not put that Connect to Link button at the bottom of that list so they have to scroll through all these banks before they can get to that button. Oh, one other tip is if you call the institution's Get by ID endpoint and add this include optional metadata argument to your request, Plaid will send back the bank's logo and their primary color, and you can use that information to make this list of banks look more recognizable. I mean, which entry do you think a customer is more likely to recognize as their bank? This one or this one? Also notice that everything here is grouped by bank first rather than by account type or anything. Organizing things in a financial institution-focused way will help the user easily see which institutions they've already connected to. And actually, that dovetails nicely into our other UI suggestion, which is keep in mind that a user might want to reconnect to their same institution to add additional accounts. Like, say I've connected to my bank to add my checking account, and then I realize I want to add my savings account, or maybe a second checking account. If you think that might happen, add some kind of add additional accounts for this bank link to your UI. Then you can send your user through Link in update mode. This will give your user the option to select an additional account or two while still reusing the original connection, which means you only get charged once, even though you're now getting data from multiple accounts. Link in update mode is probably a whole other video, but the basics are that on the server, you ask to create a link token, and then you pass in the pre-existing access token that you already have for this institution. And then don't pass anything in the products array. Note that I'm adding this account selection enabled flag. This will tell Link to bring up that screen where your user can select additional accounts, along with whatever accounts they're already connected to. And then once your user goes through this process, you can keep using your existing access token to fetch information for any new accounts that the user selects without needing to create a new item. Oh, and along those lines, listen for the new accounts available webhook. This webhook will let you know when Plaid detects that a new account has been added to a financial institution. When that happens, do something in your app like, pop up a banner or something that will proactively prompt your user to go through update mode to connect those extra accounts. And that'll reduce the risk of your user creating a new item for this same bank instead of updating the existing one. So just these UI fixes alone will do a lot to prevent duplicate items. But now let's look at some technical solutions too. The next best thing you can do to prevent duplicate items is to detect that the user is about to create one after they finish Link. You see, when your user has finished Link, but before you exchange that public token for an access token, you get some information from the client about the bank they've connected to. Specifically, you'll get an institution ID, which is like a publicly facing ID for the bank. Like INS 56 is Chase, INS 127989 is Bank of America, and so on. This, by the way, is not the same as an item ID. An item ID is basically a big old random string that represents the individual connection to the bank and is completely unique every time. The institution ID is the same for any item that connects to this bank. It never changes. You'll also get some information about the accounts that the user has selected, like the name of the account, the type and the subtype, and the account mask. So what you can do is you can take a look and see, has this user connected to this financial institution before? And if so, do any of the account masks that you've collected match the current account mask? And, typically matching by account mask is good enough. You can consider matching on some of these other values too, like I suppose type and subtype might avoid a couple of false positives in like the extremely rare cases where a user has, say, a checking and credit account with the same mask. Honestly, I don't really know how often that happens, but it couldn't hurt. I might not match on name though. Users can change these. Now, it won't happen often, but if it does and you're not refreshing this information on a regular basis, you might generate some false negatives. Anyway, if there is a match, it probably means you have a duplicate item, and you can stop the process before you exchange the public token for an access token, which in many cases is the point where you would start getting charged. Now, this technical approach will probably stop like 90% of your duplicate items before they happen. The one case this won't really stop is a situation like this. Imagine a user connects to their account and selects their savings account. Then they connect to the same bank again with the same set of credentials and selects their checking account, or maybe even an additional savings account. In this case, you have duplicate connections to the same bank, but because the account masks are different, you can't identify this as a duplicate item. Now you might think, oh, well, I can fix that easy. Let's just not let our user connect to the same financial institution more than once, right? Problem solved. The issue here is that a user might have a legitimate reason for having two different logins to the same bank. Like it turns out I have two different logins to the same brokerage firm because of like some account migrations in the past. Or imagine a family that's using some budgeting software. They might want to connect multiple accounts from the same bank that have different logins. And it's basically impossible to distinguish between a user has connected to the same bank reusing the same set of credentials and a user has connected to the same bank with a different set of login credentials. And you don't want to block that second case when trying to detect the first one. So even though you are blocking duplicate items, which are things that occur at the bank level, the best way to still do this is by searching for duplicates at the account level. But as I mentioned earlier, you can mitigate this case pretty well just by making sure you prominently display some sort of connect to more accounts option so that your user can connect to additional accounts at the same bank. So does this all seem clear if slightly confusing? Well, good, because we're going to talk about 3 more things that will make your life more complicated. First, let's talk about TANs. Now, certain banks, at the time of this recording, Chase, PNC, and US Bank, but that list is expected to grow, don't use actual account numbers. Instead, they use tokenized account numbers or TANs. Essentially, these are like one-off generated account numbers that you can use for ACH purposes, but aren't the user's actual account numbers. Now, luckily, even though these TANs are randomized, the mask value that you get back from Plaid isn't. It still reflects the user's actual account number. Which means that even with TANs, if you use the strategy of searching for duplicate accounts for a user by matching their institution ID and mask, you should still generally be okay. The big thing to watch out for is that if you're using a tool like Auth and have your user's full account number, you should still stick to using masks when displaying that account information to your user. That'll help make sure they don't see these account numbers that they don't recognize and think they still need to like add their primary checking account or something. So far, so good? Okay, weird edge casey thing number 2. Chase, PNC, and Schwab have special OAuth behavior. Specifically, your application is only allowed one connection per user login to their bank. And so if a user makes another connection from your app to one of these 3 banks, any old OAuth connections they have, they'll be invalidated. And here's the problem. You can't just prevent this by blocking incoming duplicate items. The issue is that their old OAuth connection gets invalidated at the time that your user has finished the OAuth flow with their bank. In other words, by the time the user has finished link and you have the information you need to determine that this is a duplicate item, their old connection is already invalidated. Now, we actually do some work behind the scenes to make Chase a lot better. Specifically, if you happen to have exactly the same connection as before, that is the same products with the same set of accounts, we will do some clever OAuth token replacing under the hood to make sure both connections work. I mean, yes, you'll still have duplicate items, but at least they're both working. And, to be clear, this actually helps quite a bit. Turns out Chase is a very popular bank. But otherwise, you're in a place where you might want to do the opposite of what you were doing before. That is, check and see if this is a duplicate item where a user has connected to the same account as before. If so, your best course of action might be to just remove your old, now broken, item and its associated accounts and replace it with this one. Now, how easy this is to do will depend on your application's logic. Now, if for some reason this would be a very difficult change, another option is to discard the new working item and keep the old one. Now, the old item will be in an invalid state, but you can still repair it by using link in update mode. And hopefully fixing invalid items with update mode is logic that you already have in your app. Now, obviously, this is not a great user experience, so only do this if you feel like the alternative would be worse, or you just don't think that this situation is going to come up very often. Finally, let's talk about one last case that you need to watch out for. Up until now, I've said the best way to look for duplicate items is to look for matching institution IDs, account masks, and maybe subtypes among the items that the user has connected with. But you might also need to worry about duplicate items across different user IDs in your app. I'll call these App User IDs because I know we're throwing a lot of similar sounding terms at you. Now, this could be a very legitimate use case. Like I might have multiple accounts in your app, maybe like a personal one and a business one, and they happen to use the same set of credentials to connect to the same account. Or it could be fraudulent. Maybe you have a user who keeps creating new App User IDs to take advantage of some new account promotion you have, or to get away with doing something shady before their App User ID gets banned. Now, in these situations, you can't really use the same strategy of looking at institution IDs and account masks. I mean, that works fine if you're only looking at accounts belonging to one single App User ID, but if you start looking at all accounts connected by all App User IDs, things are going to break. And the problem here is that masks are only 4 digits. And that means that, even if 50 different people in your app are using the same bank, there's already a 10% chance that 2 of these masks are going to be the same and will get incorrectly flagged as duplicates. It's a thing called the birthday paradox, and look it up when you're done with this video because it is fascinating if you're into nerdy math stuff. But in these situations, you're going to need to perform some special logic to see if different items across different user accounts are actually the same. And that logic might depend a bit on what the actual Plaid products are that you're using. If you're using Plaid Auth, for example, you can pull the full account numbers and make comparisons then. And so if 2 accounts not only have the same mask, but also the same full account number, then, hooray, it's probably a duplicate item. But hang on, you're saying, what about those TANs? If I'm looking at a bank like US Bank, won't these duplicate accounts have different account numbers because they're using TANs? Oh, look at you applying earlier knowledge. You're so smart. So it turns out that if your user is logging into the same bank with the same set of credentials, even if it's with different App User IDs in your application, these banks will give you back the same tokenized account number. So for most basic cases of catching duplicate items across App User IDs, this strategy still works. However, a shady user looking to do shady things might be able to change their TAN by revoking your app's access to their account and then relinking it, making it kind of look like a different account. So to catch cases like that, Plaid also gives you a persistent account ID for banks that use TANs, which you get along with just about any API call that returns an accounts object. And you could use this value as well. Honestly, I think most developers prefer to use this value when it's available. But then what do you do if you detect that the same account is being used across different App User IDs? Well, first double check that this really does mean you have 2 different items. One other complication that I haven't really talked about yet is joint accounts. With joint accounts, you could have 2 different items that actually point to the same account, but are legitimately different items with different credentials. In this case here, for instance, both Jane and Sean are connecting to their bank with different sets of credentials. So we really do have 2 different items, but they're connecting to the same account, so it might look like the same item. Now, the best way to detect joint accounts is probably to make a call to identity get and see if multiple owners or multiple names get returned. If they do, there's a decent chance that you're looking at a joint account. Now, how you handle this is up to you. In many apps, like a Venmo type of situation where maybe both my wife and I have separate user app IDs that are pointing to the exact same account, the correct action is to, do nothing. Really, all you want to do is add another flag in your database that says, yes, this looks like a duplicate item, but it's really not. You can also mitigate this by changing your link flow to be something other than this automatically include all accounts option. That'll also help a lot. Maybe your customer service can instruct your user to uncheck one of their checking accounts within one of their user IDs. But joint accounts aside, what do you do if it looks like 2 different App User IDs are using the same connection to a bank? Well, if you don't think it's fraudulent, you could just keep using these duplicate items. I mean, this is probably an uncommon enough situation that it's not worth the trouble to fix from a cost perspective. But for institutions like Chase, PNC, and Schwab that only allow one OAuth connection per account, you're probably going to need to do some special case plumbing underneath the hood so that these 2 different app IDs use the same connection. Now, obviously, you want to be careful here. You want to make absolutely sure that you're not leaking one user's information to another completely unrelated user. So double check that ID and account number, or I guess persistent account ID, depending on the bank. And if you're using a product like Plaid Identity and have identity information, it'd probably be a good idea to sort of match that up as well and double check. Honestly, this could be a situation where your customer support team approves this manually rather than having it be something that happens automatically in your app. It probably depends how often you think this might happen and how comfortable you are making this kind of change. Okay, that was a lot. My brain is full. But let's see if we can summarize everything that we learned today. First, fix up your UI so that your users can't add a new item without first seeing every financial institution they've already connected to. Use update mode to let them add new accounts to existing items rather than creating a new one. When your user does create a public token to connect to an account, compare the institution ID, mask, and maybe type and subtype to see if the user has connected any of these accounts before. If they have, you can probably pop up a warning message telling them that it looks like they've already connected to this bank, and you can go ahead and throw out the public token. Unless, that is, they're using Schwab, PNC, or Chase, in which case it actually might make more sense to exchange the public token for an access token and swap that out for your old access token, which is now in a broken state. And then once you've created that access token, you might want to do some additional checks to see if this user has created other items that point to this exact same account using a different App User ID. And you would probably do that using the full account number if you have it, or the persistent account ID if you're using a bank that has tokenized account numbers. If you do detect one, you might simply let it slide or, use the same item ID and access token underneath the hood for both, particularly if it's one of these banks that only permits one OAuth connection at a time. Or, you can raise it to your fraud department if this whole thing seems suspicious. So there you go. Hopefully that's everything you need to know about duplicate items. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video that I'm not sure I can legally call a quick tip anymore, but hey, why not subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can get more exciting content like this one, and I will see you in the next video.